You know when you hear a story so absurd, so hair-raising, that your first reaction is, no, this can't be real? Well, yes. That's exactly what I felt when I discovered the truth about Lop Nur. And look, I need you to prepare yourself, because what I'm about to tell you now isn't just scary, it's shocking, it's unbelievable, it's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, how could something like this exist in our world? Lop Nur. Have you ever heard that name? Maybe not, but let me tell you, this place, which seems like just another lost dot on the map of China, carries a terrible reputation. A reputation so dark that even today, decades later, many people simply call it the Sea of Death. And I know it may sound exaggerated, but it's not. We're talking about a place that swallowed explorers whole, that became a secret testing ground, that saw entire cities disappear as if they never existed. It seems so surreal, right? But it's real. Terrifyingly real. And then comes the burning question, how can a lake become a silent cemetery? How can a piece of land harbor so much mystery, so much fear, so much tragedy? You know, I remember when I first read a description of Lop Nur. The author called it a place where even the wind seems to carry secrets. Man, I got goosebumps right then and there. Because, think about it, have you ever stopped to imagine a space so vast and yet so empty, where the feeling is that you shouldn't be there? As if the earth itself were expelling you, whispering that you don't belong in that silence? It's horrible to imagine, but that's the essence of Lop Nur. A desert that was once a lake that was once life, and now is a sea of death. And I know it may seem like just a geographical curiosity, just another local legend. But pay attention, this place isn't just a setting for natural mystery. It was the scene of heavy political decisions, incredibly risky human experiences, and tragedies that still echo today. It's as if every grain of sand in that desert carries a forbidden memory. And so I ask you, would we have the courage to walk through such a place? To feel the crushing heat of the sun, the piercing silence, and at the same time know that hundreds of people before you simply never returned? It's absurd, I know. But I want you to stay with me, because at the end of this video, I'm going to show you something that completely changes the way we see Lop Nur. Something that will make you think twice before calling this place simply a desert or a dry lake. So, take a deep breath, because this story begins now. Imagine the scene, you're in the middle of an infinite vastness. There are no trees, no water, no noise. Only the wind, carrying fine sand that cuts your skin. The horizon is distant, but at the same time, it feels like it's glued to your face. It's suffocating, it's terrible, it's as if time has stopped. And then, in the middle of it all, a rusty sign stares back at you with a short phrase, no entry. And then you think, why is it forbidden? What do they not want us to discover in there? That's the question that brought me here. That's the story I want to tell you. Because Lop Nur isn't just a place on the map. It's an enigma. It's an open wound in modern history. And maybe it's also a warning. And I guarantee you, the more you know about it, the more you'll feel that chill down your spine. In the next step, I'll show you how this immense lake simply disappeared, how it became a desert, and why from then on its reputation as a curse only grew. But for now, I want you to keep this image, a place where death always seems to be lurking, and tell me, if it were you, would you have the courage to enter? So, let me give you some context. Because to understand why Lop Nur is called the Sea of Death, we need to go back in time a bit. First, imagine a gigantic lake. It's no exaggeration, Lop Nur was once immense, shining in the middle of the desert like a blue jewel. Centuries ago, it was a source of life. Caravans passed through, trade routes crisscrossed the land. It was like an oasis on an epic scale, you know? A place that gave hope in the midst of a hostile landscape. But, over time, this lake began to disappear. First, the banks receded. Then, the tributaries dried up. Until one day, puff, everything vanished. What was once life turned to silence. What was once water turned to sand. A suffocating void. And that's when things start to get strange. Because it wasn't just nature that drained Lop Nur. Of course, the climate there is brutal. Absurd temperatures, heat reaching 50 degrees Celsius during the day and freezing cold at night. But humankind also played a role. Dams, irrigation projects, river diversions. Each of these decisions accelerated the process. It's almost as if the lake had been slowly murdered, drop by drop. And think of the impact. An entire region that depended on that water was simply abandoned. Villages disappeared, trade routes ceased to exist, and the desert swallowed up human stories that may never be told again. Now, here comes the first chilling fact. even after drying up, Lop Nur didn't lose its importance. Quite the opposite. It was precisely there, in the middle of that suffocating void, that China began using the site for secret nuclear tests. Yes, you heard right. A former lake became a site for atomic explosions. The contrast is almost poetic and, at the same time, terrifying. Where once there was water and life, there was now fire and radiation. And this explains much of the heavy, dark, almost forbidden aura that still surrounds the name Lop Nur. And I know what you're probably thinking, okay, but what does this mean for us today? Well, it means that every time you hear about Lop Nur, you're not just hearing about geography or natural history. You're hearing about power, about human decisions that changed the landscape forever, and about secrets that no one dares to fully reveal. And tell me, have you ever stopped to think about how many places like this exist in the world? Places that were once life and became ruins? It's scary to imagine, because if this happened in Lop Nur, why couldn't it happen anywhere else? Now, here's the first valuable insight. When we look at the history of Lop Nur, we see a warning. Nature has its cycles, of course, but when humans interfere too much, the price can be irreversible. It's as if Lop Nur were a mirror, showing what can happen when we cross certain limits. But look, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because so far, I've only told you about the disappearance of the lake and the nuclear tests. And there's something even more bizarre, the number of explorers, scientists, and adventurers who simply never returned from there. Missing people, expeditions that ended in tragedy, stories so terrible they seem made up, but they're not. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in the next part. So stay with me, because if you found what I've said so far disturbing, wait until you hear how Lop Nur swallowed people alive. You know that feeling when the more you discover, the more questions arise? That's exactly what happens when we talk about Lop Nur. Because the lake's disappearance is absurd enough in itself, but what comes next is chilling. I'm talking about mysterious disappearances. Of people who went in there and simply never came back. And it's not an urban legend, no. These are documented cases. One of the most famous is that of Chinese explorer Peng Jiamu, in 1980. A renowned, respected scientist, he was leading a research expedition. Halfway through the crossing, he left a note saying he was going to look for water, and was never seen again. Never. As if the desert had swallowed him whole. It's terrible to imagine, but the only thing left was that note. And think about it, we're not talking about a lost tourist, but a prepared scientist, with an entire team around him, with organized logistics. And yet, he disappeared without a trace. That's insane. And Peng Jiamu wasn't the only one. Several expeditions, both military and civilian, met the same fate. Experienced, equipped people, who were supposed to return with data and discoveries, but returned in silence, in coffins, or not even that. The desert swallowed them. And this is where I ask you, how to explain a place that makes entire people disappear, without a trace? Is it the quicksand? The absurd heat? Or is there something we don't know? Something they don't want us to know? I know, it sounds like a movie script, but it's real. And this makes Lop Nur different from any other desert. Because if it were just the heat, just the isolation, the fate would be predictable. But no. Lop Nur has this living mystery, this air of curse, as if it held too many secrets to allow anyone to leave unscathed. And then I make a comparison. You've heard of the Bermuda Triangle, right? That stretch of ocean full of stories of ships and planes that vanish without explanation. Well, Lop Nur is like the terrestrial version of this phenomenon. Only, instead of sea, we have endless sand. Instead of waves, we have cutting winds. And, instead of shipwrecks, we have entire lost expeditions. Now, think about what this means. If even today, with all the technology, satellites, drones, GPS, if even today there are still gaps, still zones of silence within Lop Nur, imagine what it was like in the past. It's frightening just to think about. And you know what's most disturbing? It's that, despite all this fame, there are still people trying to unravel its secrets. Scientists, adventurers, military personnel. As if this sea of death were an irresistible challenge. As if the danger itself were an invitation. And I keep asking myself, are we, deep down, drawn to this kind of mystery? Is it in our nature to chase after what can destroy us? Because look, so far, everything I've told you should be enough for you to understand why Lop Nur has such a terrible reputation. But the truth is, that's not even the worst of it. There's still a deeper layer, a part of the story that's almost unbelievable. And I'll get to that. But first, I want you to remember this image. a desert that seems alive, that breathes silence, that holds secrets and exacts a heavy toll on those who dare challenge its limits. Peng Jiamu's disappearance was just a symbol, a message. And every step within Lop Nur echoes that message. And so I leave you with this provocation: if you were there, lost, without water, with the sun burning your skin and the wind covering your footprints, what would you do? Would you have the strength to carry on? Or would you accept the desert's embrace? I know, it's heavy, but calm down, because what comes next goes beyond nature, beyond human tragedies. The next step in this story will show you how Lop Nur also became a symbol of military power and secrecy, bearing scars that no one dares to fully reveal. And believe me, this changes everything. And now we get to the hardest part, the most disturbing. Because so far I've told you about the lake that disappeared, the desert that swallows lives, the unexplained disappearances. But there's something even greater, even more frightening. Lop Nur isn't just a place of natural mystery. It was also, and still is, a field of power. A territory used in secret, where decisions capable of changing the course of the planet were made. It was there, amid that suffocating silence, that China conducted dozens of nuclear tests. Chilling explosions, so powerful they turned the ground to glass, burned the air, and scarred the desert forever. Think about it, a region that was once life, once water, once a passageway for entire peoples, has become the scene of destruction on an absurd scale. Where there was once hope, now there was radioactivity, silence, and fear. And the most shocking thing is that this wasn't just in the past. To this day, experts believe that Lop Nur continues to guard military secrets. Underground tunnels, hidden installations, structures that satellites can only glimpse. It's as if the desert has transformed into an invisible fortress. And then I ask you, isn't it frightening to think that a place like this, seemingly empty, can carry so much power, so much destruction? That behind a simple sea of sand lies a scar that speaks of politics, war, and secrets no one dares reveal? This is the great lesson Lop Nur leaves. He is not just a geographical accident, he is a symbol, a terrifying reminder of how nature can disappear in the face of greed, how lives can be swallowed by silence, and how human power can transform even a lake into a killing field. And deep down, what does all this mean for us? It means that Lop Nur's story is not just about China, not just about a desert. It is about us. About how we deal with the planet, with power, with our own curiosity. It's about the limits we insist on pushing, even when we know the price can be extremely high. So, let me summarize. You discovered that Lop Nur was once a giant lake, a vital point of life. That it disappeared, becoming a suffocating desert. That this desert swallowed explorers whole, leaving a trail of tragedy and mystery. And that, on top of all this, it also became the site of nuclear explosions, bearing scars of power and destruction. And in the end, the question remains, will we learn from these stories, or will we repeat the same mistake elsewhere? Now, if this journey touched you, if this dive into Lop Nur gave you chills, I need you to do two things. First, like and subscribe to the channel, because that helps us continue bringing you powerful stories like this. Second, comment below, would you have the courage to set foot in Lop Nur, knowing all this? I'd really like to hear your opinion. And if you've stuck around this far, I invite you to watch this other video, points to the screen, where I talk about another mystery as unbelievable as Lop Nur. You won't believe it. Until then, and beware the silence of the deserts. It always hides more than it seems.